Let's dive in. So the sooner we start, the sooner we finish. We'll try to finish a little bit before 4 o'clock today and enjoy the amazing space down below. I think tomorrow, realistically, our break will end, our session tomorrow will end no later than 3:30. So you can plan on that with calls or any other work. And for sure, we will go no longer than 4 o'clock today. So this second conversation, building on this morning, is really about identity politics and the rise of the far right in Europe, a topic that has come up again and again and again in these European faith religion conversations. We surely all have thoughts on the subject of national populism. One of the guests who was here a couple of years ago, called Tim Alberta, wrote a book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. And in it, he reprises as one of the chapters in the book a very interesting conversation between Cyril Overon and Miroslav Volf on the sort of topic of the role of sort of religion and reordering American politics in the Ukrainian context and beyond, perhaps some of which will be a relevant thread here. But basically picking up on pieces of this morning, this session aims to talk about the rise of a new secular identity politics on the far right, especially those that make appeals to Christian civilization. Why do so many political voices today define themselves in opposition to the other? Reticence shown by Christians against Muslims, for example, left versus right. Well, Olivier Roy first and Tomáš Halík second will get into it, considering several examples that demonstrate the power of faith and others that show how right-wing populist movements are invoking religion as a cultural marker. When that happens, what are the hazards of summoning religious memory, detached from theological foundations, a lot of this morning, and theological values and institutional theological life? What hard-won insights, if any, can help us navigate the winds of national populism and identity politics and come through on the other side? Olivier Roy is the joint chair at the Schumann Center for Advanced Studies at the EU Institute, where he teaches on transnational governance. He headed the OSCE's mission to Tajikistan, consulted at the UN Afghanistan office, and has written too many books to count, the latest of which is The Crisis of Culture, Identity Politics, and the Empire of Norms. Tomáš Halík is a Czech philosopher, theologian, and Catholic priest. He teaches philosophy and the philosophy of sociology. Teaches philosophy and he teaches the sociology of religion at Charles University, where he's also president of the Czech Christian Academy. He is a former advisor to President Václav Havel, and he is a recipient of the 2014 Templeton Prize. Thank you guys for coming. Professor Roy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So we suppose we all agree that the main drivers for the populist vote are immigration and identity. And these two drivers also are very active among other parties. We see the traditional conservative right, shifting towards the same agenda, and even some social democrats, etc. So this issue of immigration, of identity, is central to the evolution of the political scene in Europe now. The issue is which identity, of course. And when most of them try to define, this identity, they refer to Christian Europe. From Denmark to Italy, it's Christian Europe. It's not necessarily the same Christianity they are referring to, but it's Christian Europe. I will go a bit more to this issue. There is something which is also obvious in Europe, including, Eastern Europe, contrary to what many people think, is a secularization, a growing process of secularization. It started, long ago in Western Europe, specifically in France. But we have two phenomena. What is secularization? Just the fact that religion is less important, the people are less practicing, etc. But what we have since, I would say, the early 50s is de-Christianization. It's not just that the people don't go to church, it's they don't know about Christianity and they don't care about Christianity. It's the crisis of the Christian culture of Europe. Secularization is obvious. In France, for instance, in 1950, you had 1,000 priests every year coming out from the seminary. Now you have 80. Wow. Wow. At a time when France has a more population than Europe. The phenomena is extending to places where were seen as a stronghold of Catholicism, Ireland and Poland. During the 8 years of the peace government in Poland, the number of practicing Catholics has decreased by 50%, from 62 to 30 something. And it's stronger among the youth. Only 20% now of the young Poles go regularly to Mass. But they still refer to Christian identity of Poland. So there is not a correspondence necessarily between Christian identity and Christian practices. That's something which is very important. But since the 60s, what we see is not only that people don't go to Mass anymore, but they don't know about Christianity, they don't care about Christianity. It's stronger in France than elsewhere, but it's the same pattern, more and more. In Italy, it's a generation later. People of my age, they know what Trinity means. They know what consubstantiality means. But the younger, they don't. They don't know anymore, our students. Just a story, which is a true story. When I was a school teacher in the 70s, that was the arrival of the second generation of Muslim migrants. So this second generation, they were achieving studies in the high school, so they were teachers in that school. And one of the students was practicing Ramadan. And the other students asked what it is. What is Ramadan? And he said, oh, Ramadan, it's Muslim Lent. And everybody understood more or less. 50 years later, we have recently a revival among young Catholics, Generation Z Catholics, born-again Catholics. And one student decided to practice Lent. And all the students were surprised. But what is Lent? And she said, well, Lent is a Christian Ramadan. So you see the extent of the de-Christianization. So now the populists, they use Christian identity. For instance, they want to have crucifix. In Italy, you know the story of the Lauti case, now it's 15 years ago, where somebody tried to force the Italian government to withdraw the crucifix from schools. It didn't work. And the argument of the Italian government in the European Court of Human Rights was not about religion. They said the crucifix is a marker of Italian culture, which is interesting. No, it's because they thought that they could not defend the crucifix as a religious marker because of freedom of religion and things like that. So it's a cultural marker, and they won. They won on this point. So you see the populist pushing for putting nativity scenes in the town hall, putting crucifix calvaries outside the cities, defending, so what I would call Christian folklore. But in terms of values, most of the populist electorate is liberal. They have adopted the values of the 60s. The families, broken families, divorce, abortion, homosexuality, etc., etc. They are absolutely not, pushing for the return to a traditional Christian family. And they use the argument of the liberal mores, the liberal practices of the West against the Muslims. They say, we, the Europeans, we are feminists. We, the Europeans, we are liberal. We don't blame homosexuals, etc., etc. So a good example is Geert Wilders in Holland. He's using the liberal values as identity markers. So it's no more global values. They say, we have our values, we respect women, you the Muslims, you don't, right? So we are two different civilizations, cultures, etc., etc. And this use of liberal values like identity markers is very important because it's no more seen as a universal. There is no more universal human rights. So we have our rights because it's our identity. And we have this juxtaposition between a Christian identity, which is largely folkloric, and an absolute opposition, I would say, to the Christian norms, traditional Christian norms and values. Of course, we have some populist movement that claim to want to revive the traditional Christian family. What is interesting is that none of the leaders are a model of a traditional Christian family. Melanie in Italy, a child outside the wedlock. Same thing for Marion Maréchal in France, and so and so. I think it's Hamza, which this morning mentioned the fact that many fundamentalist Christians see Trump as a Cyrus. But we have a lot of Cyruses. They're all Cyrus. We don't have a good Christian political leader almost anyway. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for good reasons. The electorate share the same kind of values than this kind of leaders. The electorate is not made of practicing people. So we have this contradiction, which looks like a contradiction. Maybe it's not so much a contradiction, but it looks like a contradiction. So the problem is, what about the believers? And here we have, I would say, two trends. One, what we call in France, the catho-tradi, traditional Catholics. They buy, the story of the Christian identity of Europe. They complain that the Europeans are not good believers, so they want to push the people back to the church. They think that they have to make a work of a mission, to be missionary in their own country, and possibly converting Muslims. They are trying to do that also. But they defend the idea that Europe is Christian, which is sometimes just, I would say, a window for Europe is white for many of the populists. Christianity as whiteness. So there is an apparent contradiction. Something is interesting, and which is very similar in the USA and in Europe. How is it that the many, I will not say most because it depends on how you define an intellectual, but you have many Catholic intellectuals involved, and very few Protestants, both in USA and in Europe, for totally different reasons. So, in the USA, but you know better, it's the Catholics who are the vanguard of the intellectual struggle. Take the Supreme Court. 6 Catholics, and just, if I am not mistaken, 1 Protestant, who is not an evangelical. It's strange because it doesn't correspond to the religious sociology of the USA. In Europe, we have now great Catholic intellectuals like my colleague Pierre Manin. He was a liberal 20 years ago. He's a born-again Catholic. He was born a Catholic. I am not sure, but he's a born-again, he's a practicing Catholic, and now he's opposing liberalism, saying liberalism is a failure. But what we have are non-Catholics, or at least non-believing intellectuals, who think that Europe should go back to Catholicism. Eric Zemmour is a good example. He's Jewish, not practicing Jewish. He doesn't intend to convert, he's very clear on that. But he thinks that France should be Catholic, not just Christian, because he considers the Protestants as a dissident, and traitors in a way. He blames the Jews who want to be buried in Jerusalem, saying that if you want to be buried, you belong to the country where you want to be buried. If you are a good French citizen, you should be buried in France. And there was some scandals about this kind of thing. So his last book is about the return of Catholicism as the what? Religion or ideology or culture of what? But he has a problem, he says, with Catholicism. And this problem with Catholicism is the Pope and the Church, and Jesus. No. Okay, so if you take, the Pope and Jesus outside the framework of Catholicism, what do you have? Protestantism, maybe, or I don't know. No, not Jesus. So he stepped back recently about this declaration about Jesus, but he thinks that the Pope is a problem. We have Welbeck, as a novelist. Welbeck would like, everybody to become Catholics again, except him, because it's too boring. He spent 3 days in a monastery, and about 3 days he left and said, okay, it's not my way. Renaud Camus also, and so we have a whole category, and in the south of Europe, many of the populist leaders, like Salvini, well, it's not up to me, to estimate the level of faith of anybody. But clearly, these guys, they are not real churchgoers. They don't care too much. But they adopt a Catholic discourse. So, why Catholicism? And here, it's a work in progress. Why this fascination for Catholicism and not for Protestantism? My answer, and here we enter into speculative domain, is that Catholicism is the only, I would say, not religion, but among the Christians, is the Catholics are the only ones to propose an anthropology, to have a vision of what a society could be, to have a definition of the family, not just as a way where you can be brought up as good Christians, but as the basis of the organization of a good society. And this turn, this anthropologic turn of the Catholicism, for me, it's the 12th century. The Council of Latran and Thomas of Aquinas, who took back to Aristoteles to try to define what could be a good society, knowing that there will never be a Christian society or a theocratic society. It was not a question. They are taking back, the story of Augustinus, the two cities. We know that we are part of the city of God, of course, but there is a city of the human being, and we have to do something with this city. We have to promote, a good society as far as it could be. I think that the problem we have now is, as I said in my book, a crisis of culture. But the crisis of culture is a crisis of anthropology. We do not have any model of an effective and visible anthropology. We are in a society of strong individualism, as you know, where everybody is supposed to construct his or her own life in consideration with what we wish, what we want, what we think we are, what we think we should be, but not with the global vision of society. And on the right, same thing, the extreme right is not fascist in the historical sense of the term. They they don't believe in utopia. They don't think that we will create a new society. They are nostalgic. They want to go back to the good old times. The debate on Mussolini is very interesting in Italy because they are erasing everything which make Mussolini a real fascist. And it's not because they want to present a nice Mussolini. It's because they don't care about the real fascism. They are not Democrats, sure, they are not opposed to a certain form of violence. But what they want is a system of normativity inside the society, but not to create a new human being and things like that. These guys are in Silicon Valley, the guys who want to create a transhuman something. And so this so-called Catholic anthropology is the only option on the market which is seen by many of the populists and especially the intellectuals as a possibility to reconstruct a society. But faith is dispensable in this perspective. And so they have a problem. The problem is the church. The Catholic Church, the Pope. You know all that the MAGA people tried to make some sort of coup d'etat or coup of church. During the conclave, they heavily pushed to have a conservative Pope. And that's something very interesting because here we look at the church from outside as a debate between liberal and conservative. Francesco was liberal, supposedly. And now the question is the new Pope a liberal or a conservative? Is he slightly more conservative or a lot more conservative? He's in favor of the Mass in Latin and so and so. It doesn't work, no. The big problem of the conservative Catholics in the West is that the church is a universal church. And the center of the gravity of the church is no more in the north, is no more in the Western world. It's outside now. So for the church, it would be suicidal to adopt the identity discourse of the populist of the right, the right populist. Because first, Europe is no more Christian in the sense of faith. And second, because the Christians are in the south. More than ever before, the church is affirming we are, Catholic means universal. We are not the church of Europe. It's not by chance that the two popes, the two last popes, Francesco and Leo, are not European. But not only they are not European, they are not the product of the territorial church, the system of bishoprics, They are missionaries. And it's new in the history of the church. Most of the popes were always, they could be member of an order, Franciscans and what you want, but they were all rooted in the territoriality of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is a territorial, in Europe, is a territorial church with roots, with circumscriptions, borders, so. It's finished. The territorial system of the bishoprics is dead. In France, a third of the priests are coming from Africa. And they have a contract, short-term contract. They come for 3 years, 4 years, and so and so. And the other part of the priests are from the fraternities, Saint-Martin, etc. So people who don't have their loyalty first to the bishop, but to their own order. And of course, they are incardinated, in a bishopric, but they might go elsewhere, and they are thinking elsewhere. So the territorial system of the church is in crisis. And and here we have the debate of the attitude of the church towards the migrants. It will be my conclusion. It's not, a problem of the issue of migration. No, it's a problem of what is the church? What is to be a Catholic? So the church is universal. So they say there is no priority. We should not support, the white people more than the black people, and so we are all brothers. That's, Francesco, Leo, they are always, hammering this idea. We are all so. And it's not a story of liberal versus conservative. You cannot say that Francesco was a liberal. He was strongly anti-homosexual. In private, he used some bad words, He was against abortion, strongly against abortion. Yeah, he made a discourse in Belgium which has infuriated, the bishops. He's not a liberal, but he is for universality. So the real debate is between identity and universalism, not between liberal and conservatism. And the second debate is about love and norms. Well, of course, the church is normative by definition. The problem is, where do you put the cursor, between love and norms? So the present popes, they are pushing towards love. And the Tradicato are pushing towards norms, abortion, etc. The issue of abortion is a consequence of the debate between love and norms. But if you are a believer, you may go more to love. If you are a non-believer, what is left? Norms. You cannot love if you are not. So it's why now the Catholic identity, I say, is mainly on the right, is mainly pushing towards norms. It's only way to attract people who are not Catholic, who are not believers. So it will be my last sentence. We have a reaction inside the conservative priests, for instance, to go against the populists, not because they are liberal, but because they say we are universalist, and we should love our neighbor. In Florence, where I live, the last convent with monks, is a Franciscan convento at the top of the hill. And these guys are very conservative. They are not leftist. No. One day, passing by, I saw a carabinieri in the street, and going towards the convento, we saw some dozens of black migrants, taking refuge and being welcomed by the Franciscans. So we are not in the USA, so the police carabinieri will never force the door of a convent. So these Franciscans were protecting refugees, but in terms of values, etc., they are not leftists, they are not liberals. And so we have something which is going on, which is a bit more complex than, I would not say that the newspaper are writing because you are here, but that the debate is about now. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Great. Thank you very much. Great. There's this great phrase, long obedience in the same direction, and it is an honor to have you guys both. I didn't mention that Professor Halík is still a pastor at the St. Salvatore Church today, and he used to live with drug addicts and work in the underground church. He was a confidant of Havel. So with gratitude on that first wonderful presentation, Professor Halík, over to you.
Thank you. After a lovely French English, you will now listen to the Czech English.
And you can play.
Thank you for inviting me to this marvelous place, this marvelous Mediterranean weather. But unfortunately, there is not this Mediterranean custom of siesta after lunch. So siesta is the part of Roman Catholic identity. But okay, I can live with this. I would like to put our topic into a broader context. These conferences are called Faith Angle Europe. We are talking about religion. However, faith and religion cannot be confused. Their relationship is very complex. In many European languages, the term religion is derived from the Latin verb redigare, meaning reconnect. One of the important roles of religion was integration and reintegration, the effort to maintain order and restore it when it was threatened by chaos, by the invasion of something new and unknown. The phenomenon of faith, in the biblical sense, caused a revolutionary shift It changed the cyclical understanding of time, the eternal return of the same, into linear time, turning the direction of the life of the individual and society toward the expectation of an eschatological future. The place of theophany, the self-revelation of the divine, became, instead of nature, history, its unique events. There was a shift from nostalgia for the golden age at the beginning, the lost paradise of the past, to hope and expectation for a promised future at the end and beyond the end of history. The future became more important than the past. This openness to the new and the future was transformed in the secular context into the idea of progress, one of the pillars of modernity. Secularization was not the end of religion, but a transformation caused by the dynamism of faith. Faith is a specific phenomenon entered the history of religion with Hebrew prophets at about the same time of the axial age, when philosophy in Greece, the philosophical reflection of myths in Greece. The faith is transformation, transforming and transcendent the history of religion. The faith operates in many forms, even beyond the boundaries of organized religion. The secular West has many Christian and Judeo-Christian genes in its DNA that have not disappeared, but only mutated and transformed. Modern political ideologies and utopias are the unwanted children of Christian eschatology. Similarly, the missionary zeal of European Christianity to bring salvation to all corners of the world has its secular version in the civilizational expansion of the West. All the dreams became reality in a new context and in new forms. Historical changes are not driven solely by economic processes, interest, and rational calculations. If we want to truly understand them, we must supplement the analysis of the social and political sciences with a study of a deeper dimensions of these cultures. In other words, the collective unconscious. Their unresolved conflicts, unhealed traumas, and the scars of the past survive. Forgotten, repressed, suppressed fragments of the past return. This happens not only in the psychology of individuals, but also in the cultural and political life of societies. The development of technology and economy in the age of high modernity has enabled Western civilization to aspire to the role of global hegemon. Western modernity has brought the most dynamic process in human history, the process of globalization. Our world is now globally interconnected. In the areas of technology and economics, especially in the exchange of the most important commodity, information. However, an interconnection in the spheres of politics, culture, and religion is much more complicated. Globalization gave rise to the internet age, which then underwent a rapid acceleration and subsequently experience a crisis. There is a dialectical relationship between the acceleration of globalization and the end of the Cold War and the bipolar world. The fall of communism, on one hand, was one of the fruits of globalization. Communist states, characterized by the state-planned economics and ideological censorship of information, were unable to compete in the free market of goods and ideas. On the other hand, the fall of communism accelerated globalization. It seems that the global victory of liberal democracy and the capitalist economy was imminent. This dream of a happy end of the world history was iconically expressed in Francis Fukuyama's book, The End of History. However, Samuel Huntington warned that closer ties between civilizations could lead to conflict, to clash. What is globalization for the West is imperialism for the rest. Humanity remembered this prophecy on September 11, 2001. The first decades of the 21st century has revealed a dark side of globalization, including financial crisis, the global coronavirus pandemic, and the military conflicts, among others. Among these, the most dangerous is the Russia's attempt at a genocide in Ukraine, which is testing the West's ability to defend itself. Vladimir Putin's plan to restore the Soviet Empire and Russian international influence after the failure of attempts to democratize Russia reveals that the primary source of energy of the Soviet Empire was not Marxism, but Russian expansionism, the legacy of Russian religious messianism, including the cult of suffering and sacrifice. We know it from the classic Russian literature. Many illnesses affecting individuals are psychosomatic in nature. Many illnesses affecting civilizations are spiritual and political in nature. The spiritual and political aspects of society are interconnected in a similar way as the psychological and somatic aspects of the individuals. Maintaining and developing democracy and a free society, as well as international and intercultural cooperation, requires a certain moral environment, a climate of shared values, and a culture of relationships. The current state of this climate is just as dangerous as the changes in the natural climate that are the subject of environmental studies and initiatives. The crisis of globalization is accompanied by a boom in toxic phenomena such as populism, nationalism, right-wing and left-wing extremism, religious fundamentalism, and fanaticism. Many are reactions to globalization, the result of fears about the threat to particular identities. These and similar phenomena attack the bastions of modernity, scientific rationality, and liberal democracy. Following the crisis of traditional religious certainties and authorities, the certainties and authorities of modernity are collapsing. Chaos ensues, making it difficult to distinguish between what is dying and what is being born. Chaos tends to be ambivalent, possessing both destructive and creative elements. What is the role of religion and faith communities in this situation? It is and can be very important, critical. It is and will continue to be ambivalent and enigmatic. As a case study, I would like to mention the transformation of Christianity, especially the Catholic Church. With the advent of modernity, after Enlightenment, Christianity lost its role as religion in the sense of religare, of the unifying force in European society. Religion became just one sector of life, of society, and the individuals, and the Christian faith as one of the variants of worldview, Weltanschauung. During modernity, several pretenders to the traditional role of religion, the role of a common language of civilization, have come and gone. Science, culture, especially art during the Romantic period in the 19th century. Political religions and ideologies such as communism, Nazism, fascism in the first half of the 20th century. Television and mass media in the second half of the century as a thought of interpreting the world, a source of shared stories, an arbiter of truth and importance. I have seen it in television, so it's true. It was the first item in news, so it is important. And also tool influencing people's lifestyle and thinking. Later, perhaps the global capitalist economy plays this role. Christianity considered its primary role to be mission, evangelization, and inculturation of the gospel message. Evangelization without inculturation is merely superficial religious indoctrination. Globalization has brought a paradox, a tension between breadth and depth. Christianity has spread globally across the planet, but in the same time, a process of exculturation of Christianity has begun. Many elements of Christianity, as we have seen, have become part of secular culture in a transformed, anonymous form. But at the same time, the Church's ability to address and influence contemporary culture, the way of thinking and life of our contemporaries, is weakening. The winner of the confrontation between modernity and the Church was not atheism, but rather apatheism, the people's indifference to the offerings of organized religion. The main challenge for the Church has long been not atheism, but new forms of religion and spirituality that are emancipating themselves from the forms of religion offered by the Church. Religious illiteracy is rampant. Many people's view on religion are not based on knowledge, solid information, or personal experience. They are mostly uncritically taken from the public opinion and the media, which focus mainly on the scandals in the Church. However, we are also encounter a very low level of religious knowledge among many people who profess to be believers. In many traditional Catholic countries, from Brazil to Poland, churches have relied too much on tradition and underestimated the need for education and training of believers that would encourage them to seek honest answers to the challenges of pluralistic culture. The market of esotericism and syncretism responded to the interest in spirituality before churches. At the Second Vatican Council, the Church decided to abandon its strategy of cultural wars with modern society and embark on strategy of dialogue and cooperation with secular humanism. The Second Vatican Council was an attempt to move the Church from Catholicism, a form of Christianity that thought to be defined itself in opposition to Protestantism in the modern world, and should shut itself off in a ghetto. The Church and Vatican Council made an exodus from this Catholicism toward Catholicity, the universality and ecumenicity of Christianity. However, the Church's offer of openness and solidarity with modern people expressed in the first sentence of the conciliar document Gaudium et Spes came too late and was not met with willingness to reciprocity on the part of modern people. Moreover, this offer arrived at a time when the modern age was already ending. The 1960s, when the council took place, brought the peak of modernity in the form of the cultural revolution around 1968, but also its end, the year 1969, the year of invention of microprocessor and the moon landing, can be considered as a symbolic beginning of the postmodern era. Does the Catholic Church today have a project that can undertake to respond to the challenges of this era? Is there an alternative to the destructive form of religion, to the alliance of religion with nationalism and populism, to the transformation of religion into an identity ideology, to nostalgia for the medieval Christianitas, Christian Europe, as dreamed of by the Romantics of the 19th century? Can the Catholic Church overcome temptation of affinity with authoritarian regimes, which led to Christian fascism in the 1930s, and which is reappearing today in the alliance between evangelicals and traditionalist Catholics, especially in the United States, and as a variant of Christian fascism can be found today in Russian Orthodoxy and the support for the war against the degenerate West. It is no coincidence that these two forms of Christian fascism are linked by mutual sympathy and efforts to form a political alliance, that Russia supports Western Christian nationalists in their opposition to the European Union and welcomes the isolationism of the United States. Secular society has underestimated the power of religion, especially the psychological power of the religious language, symbols, and rituals. So I will shorten it radically. I'm convinced that the Catholic Church today has a project at its disposal, but one that needs to be reflected upon more deeply and then systematically implemented. It is still in its early stages. I'm referring to the Pope Francis's vision, which includes the synodal reform of Christianity. Perhaps one of the motives why Pope Francis launched this radical reform process at the end of his pontificate was the reflection on the state of the Church after a tsunami of scandalous cases of abuse. The scandals involving the sale of indulgences at the dawn of a modern era exposes a crisis within the entire medieval church system. They led to the Reformation, both Catholic and Protestant Reformation, Similarly, the abuse scandals have now exposed a crisis of the clerical system as a whole, revealing the abuse of power and authority. Pope Francis has identified synodal reform as a main task of the Church for the entire third millennium. He emphasized that it's not only a matter of reforming institutional structures, but above all, of reforming relationships and mentalities, of changing the moral climate in the Church. In the treasure of the theological tradition, there is a concept of perichoresis, which refers to a relationship between humanity and divinity in Christ, the relationship between the persons of the Trinity, mutual interpenetration without loss of identity. Perhaps this type of relationship should serve as an inspiration for globalization that extend beyond mere networking. Dialogue, which was the key concept of the Second Vatican Council, is not longer sufficient today. Today, the mutual relationship between individual churches and religions, Christianity and secular culture in our world, and the relationship between faith and unbelief, trust and skepticism, in the minds of our contemporaries, is not a relationship between separated entities, but a deep intertwining. Will this chaos take on a destructive or a creative form? Is a perichoretic globalization possible? Synodal reform can be much more than just a transformation of a rigid clerical system in the Church into a more flexible set of relationships. Synodality means deepening and expanding ecumenism. So there was a second ecumenism, the interreligious, and the Pope Francis came with the fourth ecumenism. He extended his call to include what we can call the fourth ecumenism, a responsible care for all forms of life, that the entire planet may become oikumene, a common home. So I have a lot of 1 minute, okay. Synodal reform can enable Christianity to take an alternative form of religion. Religion does not have to fulfill only a political culture role of integrating society, religare, religion, in the sense of religare. Religion, religio, can mean what is the verb relegere suggests, relectire, the ability to read and understand again and more deeply, to read again and more deeply the sources of faith, Bible and tradition, but also read the signs of the times, God's speech in events in society and culture. The Church can be a school of contemplative approach to reality, a school of new hermeneutics. This is related to Pope Francis' favorite metaphor, the image of the Church as a field hospital. This metaphor also deserves further reflections. In the words of Pope Francis, Synodal Church to be a field hospital, and I think the field hospital must be backed by a solid institution capable offering a range of other therapeutical services, from diagnosis, the spiritual diagnosis of the era, to rehabilitation. Societies exposed to wars and repressive regimes in particular need healing from trauma, wounds of the past, and cultural reconciliation and forgiveness. Politicians and diplomats can contribute to silence guns in Gaza, Ukraine, and other places. Still, the process of reconciliation will take generations, and this is where the communities of faith have an irrepressible role to play. I do not today last sentence. I do not see today's central dilemma between conservatives and progressives, or between the right and the left, but rather between the surface and the depth. Synodality in the sense of common journey, synodos, making full use of the spiritual, moral, and therapeutic potential of religion, can be an alternative to abuse of religion as a weapon in the destructive cultural wars. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. All right, over to you. And maybe just for context, I mean, I think what we're really trying to do, picking up on Simon's lovely question this morning about, is religion some distinct heft thing, or what people describe it to be, and can it be sort of moved around, or is it substantive, is to try to get at a little bit of the underlying roots against the rise of voices that appeal to it, maybe in a way that uses it. Let's not forget, right, that the world has 2.3 billion Christians, 1.8 billion Muslims, 1.1 billion Hindus, 500 million Buddhists, 400 million folk religions, and only 1.2, 1.3 billion people who are not in any way religious. So we're sort of getting at that part of it. Let's start off with Christine Ockrent from France Culture, please.
Thank you, Josh. My question to Olivier, and it would be a question about Europe. Do you see any chance, or any risk, rather, of a further Americanization of the blending between religion and politics? The same way we are witnessing that blending between Trumpism, the evangelicals, and the renewal of nationalist Catholicism in the US.
There is a clear endeavor to do that. You know, if we look at billionaires like Stéhin and Bolloré, they are providing huge amounts of money to create think tanks, to create training centers for a new generation of Catholic intellectuals who could be influential, not as intellectuals, but as assistants for parliamentary in the parliament, as members of cabinets, as high civil servants, etc., etc. So, you know, the way the Heritage Foundation or other American institutions used to provide a new intelligentsia, yeah, and to infiltrate, if I can say that, this new intelligentsia in the administration, the media, etc. Yes, they are trying to do that. That's clear. So during the last election in France of the Rassemblement National, they had some 100 members of parliament. These people are, most of these people have no formation. They are almost people in the street that have been picked, you know, because they didn't believe that they would be elected. No. But these institutions provided the parliamentary assistance. So when I discuss with a member of parliament of the Rassemblement National, it's stupid things. But the guy, the assistant, he is able to quote Thomas d'Aquin, Thomas of Aquinas, etc., etc. So we have this endeavor. The problem is that the way they speak seems to be unusual compared to the USA. In the USA, when you speak about religion, it's okay. You can be more or less conservative, but the language of religion is spoken language. Not in France. Not in France. So it doesn't really work. The other way they are trying to do is to fill the landscape in the very sense of a landscape, you know, physical landscape, with Christian symbols. They are organizing, you know, pilgrimages, nativities, etc., etc. but the people look at that, it's for them it's Christian Disneyland. It might be nice or not. If it's beautiful, it's okay. But the message doesn't pass. The message that of spirituality and so doesn't pass. Still, I think that this way to have a policy of influence comparable to what is going on in the USA doesn't really work. But who knows?
Quick on this.
Just a quick remark. I think the Enlightenment wanted to solve the problem of the relation between religion and politics with the division between state and church. But now the situation is changing. The churches have no more monopoly for religion, and the state have no monopoly for the politics. So we must rethink it in a new situation. So
that's good. Ann Snyder from Comment Magazine.
Thank you both. Father Halík, this is 2 questions for you. One is, how would you succinctly articulate what you discern is struggling to be born today? You talked about the sort of sense of chaos that is suffusing, I think, a lot of people's experience of their society, of the globe, of reality right now. And it's very hard to see clearly between, quote, what is dying and what is struggling to be born. And so I would just love to hear you articulate, your sort of whole talk was about that, but I think in a sentence or 2, what you see as struggling to be born and who or what can help midwife that. That's question 1. And the second is, I loved your description of you do not see the divide anymore being between right or left or conservative or progressive, but rather between the surface and the depths. And why does it feels to me, I think like to a lot of us, that the surface is quote unquote winning. The surface is winning. It's louder, it's easier to communicate in our digital technology, et cetera, pace of life. Do you see any hope for the quote depths, the depths, per his distinction of what's actually dividing people?
Yes, I have the question. I have the answer. One answer for the both questions, because I think the solution is the transition from the surface to the contemplative approach to reality. I think this we need what is in the Jesuit spirituality is this culture of the spiritual discernment. And they have one special method for this, the examen, so to reflect what is happening in our soul, what is happening during a day. I have read something, I took part in discussion, and what has it left in me? And then it is this relecture, to read it again every day, to see, to relecture of this my day, of all my experiences, and to understand what is behind this, because sometimes we have all the tendency very quickly to have our evaluation of this, sometimes very emotional. But we need this inner liberty from this, to have a distance and to have this contemplative approach, to read it again. And I think it is the way from this surface to the depths. Meditation and this, yes. And the second question was practically the same, but how to distinguish?
Well, the first question, yes.
From this
you
chaos,
just,
from this chaos, yeah. I think it is this way. We have also the chaos in ourselves because we are part of the world. Believers, non-believers, Christians, Muslims, we are part of this world. There is this interconnection with all the things. But we need the spiritual liberty to have this ability to read it again, to reflect it. And I think the community of faith should be the school of this new hermeneutics, of this contemplative approach to reality.
But can I, if I may, if that's an answered contemplation to the question of what's struggling to be born anew, what was the second question? I don't think we quite touched that.
Yeah.
Did we get at the second question you raised, Anne?
Yeah, practically the same. No?
Yeah.
It was this, how to distinguish this. Yeah, I think it's this culture of spiritual discernment.
yeah, well, no, it's very helpful. I think part of what I'm asking is it feels like in our narrative frame, and frankly, all of us in any form of public communication and media, I think we often get accused of operating at the surface level, and our politics operates, and it can cause a lot of dividing lines. And obviously, there are real differences between human communities and societies the world over. This is a fact of life. This is pluralism. But I think you're onto something very perceptive when you say the divide between peoples today are actually not so much the political divides we so often talk about, or even populist versus elite. I mean, we can divide the world X ways and Y. But you said between the surface and the deep, is what I heard you say.
Yeah.
And it just seems like we're in a time, especially because of technology, that the surface will continue to win out as determining our frame for how we understand one another and how we understand the future. And I guess my question was, do you see any hope, whether in a younger generation or a different form of reactivity, where what you're articulating very broadly as the depths, and I think you're including this contemplative approach to reality and the practices therein of actually rising up? What could be the mechanisms by which the depths, which I would also argue are what is true, could actually be a force again broadly in public life and political life the world over? Very huge, humongous question, perhaps overly big, but
I think there's a wonderful method in this synodal renewal, because practically these synodal meetings are the meetings of people in the small around the table, and at the beginning everybody should say his own opinion, without any censorship, without any comments from the others, to speak very freely, openly. When the Pope at this Bishop Synod said, "Now please say what you really think," and it was like a bomb in the episcopate, and they were used to say what is expecting, but not say what you really think. And then it's a very important moment, some 3 minutes of silence, and to reflect what the other people said, because God can speak to us through the others. It is an old method in the Benedictine monasteries. In the regule of Saint Benedict is that abbot has a responsibility. He will decide, but before he decides, he must listen to the opinion of all members of the community, also the youngest brother who is cooking in the kitchen, because God can speak through everybody, and to reflect it. And then in the second part, each member is only saying what was important, what the other people say, what is left in my soul. And then is another moment of reflection, and then to put the ideas together. And I think it is a genial method. It is something a little bit like the psychotherapeutic circles also, because the church needs a psychotherapy, and I think the synodal reform is a sort of psychotherapy of the church. But I think it's a great thing. I use it with young people in the several occasions, and I think it would be a wonderful method for the parliament, to have a moment of silence and to reflect what the other has said, and if there is perhaps something inspiration also what the opposition is saying. So I think these moments of contemplation and to put my own opinion for a moment in the bracket, and to listen, really to listen the others, and to contemplate it, and to put these all experiences together. I think it's a great method. And I'm also doing it with some young people, and it works.
There's a little problem with that, though, in Washington, right? Because you know how they define listening in Washington?
Yeah.
Waiting your turn to speak. You don't really listen. Okay, David Brooks, New York Times.
It's probably no accident that my wife and I have adjacent questions. I too want to know if there's Christian nationalism, Christian populism, what language and ethos of Christianity can emerge to stand up to that? And I was struck by the tension Mr. Roy drew between identity and universalism, and between norms and love. And it was sort of the Christianity of order versus the Christianity of love and dynamism. And it seemed to me that overlapped with the tension or the distinction Mr. Halík drew between religion and faith. And it reminded me of a sentence I'm going to read from Mr. Halík's wonderful book, this one, The Afternoon of Christianity, one of my favorite sentences in it. If we are seeking some measure of the authenticity of faith, let us not look for it in what people profess in words, but in the degree to which the faith has penetrated and changed their existence, their hearts. And that goes back to the distinction between the surface and the depths. And it seemed to me the distinction was something that Joel talked about earlier this morning between a propositional faith, and maybe we could call it a cognitive faith, and a more spiritual contemplative faith. The distinction between a faith of order and stasis, between a faith of pilgrimage and mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seemed to me that that shift in ethos between a faith of identity, of norm, of religion, I don't know what the Latin word is, and surface, to a faith of contemplation, depth, and movement and dynamism, strikes me as a cultural tension that is a natural split that is more profound than left-right, populist, not populist. Mm-hmm. So I'd ask each of you to comment on that distinction, which I guess is what we've been talking about for the last 5 minutes.
So I agree with what was the question in this?
If you can distinguish between a sort of faith or religiosity, a spiritual depth that on the one hand could be something like norms and static and ideals, not sure like what, cognitive, versus instead a faith that is movement and depth and ultimately love and integration. How do those compare? Say about how that relates to the idea of something new being born.
Yes, I think this is the answer also. That there is this very important distinction between the religion as a pattern and the faith as a way, as a process of maturation. And I think on this process of maturation is also very important to go through some sort of the dark night, to be exposed to some doubts, crisis. And I think it is also one Christian response to this, that in Christianity, the most important story is the Easter story. And I think there is this, that something must die, and then is a resurrection. But a resurrection is not a return to what has been before. Resurrection is the transformation. The resurrected Christ came to his nearest and dearest, and they were not able to recognize him. The Mary Magdalene saw he's a gardener, and Thomas recognized him after the wounds. And it's also for me very important. It is now in English also, this my book, touch the wounds, because in the Gospels there is only one moment when Jesus is called God, and it is when the Apostle Thomas is touching the wounds. He see through he has through the windows of the wounds God. And I think I don't believe in a God without wounds. I don't believe in Christ without wounds. It's a wonderful legend by Saint Martin. To Saint Martin, the devil appeared in the figure of Christ. And Martin, where are your wounds? And he has no wounds. And I think it is the sign of identity. The face must have also wounds, and I believe only with God with wounds, with church with wounds. So these wounds are important, and it was my great moment when I visited the place of the martyrdom of Saint Apostle Thomas after the legend in India, and on the place there was an orphanage, and I saw there the suffering of these hungry, sick children, and I realized, oh, they are the wounds of Christ today, and if I ignore these wounds of Christ today, I have no right to say my God and my Lord. So I think this to accept the wounds and accept this dark night, this crisis. The crisis is always the great opportunity. And today, for many people, there is a crisis in the marriage, and so it's a way we will disappear. But a crisis is always the challenge for maturity, and also this resurrection, the key dogma of Christianity, is not a story about the dead body coming back. It is a transformation, radical transformation, and I think also this must be these dark nights on the way of our faith, and in the church, and in the individual story. And I think also the theology should offer some interpretation and some spiritual responses to these moments of Christ, moments of crisis.
I think this polarity, religion, faith, stasis and movement, identity, and universalism always existed. So it's part of the religion. What is new? It's the political implications. What does it mean now? It's interesting to see that there is an endeavor by some Catholic conservative to justify in religious terms the expulsion of migrants. When G. Devens tried to explain to the Pope what Ordo Amoris means, we have a typical example, of a theological argument used to justify a policy, a given policy. And this use of this polarization now, it's new. It's new. The problem is how to answer. Just to reaffirm from above that we should think about love and biodiversity, or to propose a concrete policy. But the popes, they avoid to propose a concrete policies, and here we have a gap, which is okay for the politicians, because so the Pope is speaking with words, but he doesn't propose anything, so we can go on with our policy. But it also creates some problems with people who wants to help the migrants, for instance. Once again, not because they're leftists at all, but we have a movement now of moral dissent from individuals, not from organizations. They just refuse to, they just try to help migrants, for instance, without any other justification than love and universalism. And it's interesting to see that it's an individual movement. It's a collection of individuals who are acting here and there, totally disconnected from the political opposition.
All right, if we could ask you to take a seat, please. We're going to keep it going. The first question comes from Tomáš Chatterton-Williams, who writes for The Atlantic, has his own book recently, and has a connection to AEI. Thomas.
Hi, thank you, and thank you both for your comments. I have a tangential question for Olivier. I found the idea, the thesis behind your recent book, The Crisis of Culture, to be intriguing, and I wondered if you could just elaborate on what you mean by saying that we are not in the midst of a cultural transformation, but crisis over the very notion of culture. If you could elaborate that point. Thank you.
Okay, I have 1 hour.
Go. No, you do not. No.
Roughly speaking, what I'm saying is that we have a crisis of the shared implicit. We don't share anymore implicitly values, vision, etc., etc. So everything has to be to go through communication, and communication because you communicate outside, the reference to a shared implicit. Communication is codification. Every thing you say has to have one meaning and just one meaning. Emotions, it's an emoji, etc. It's why, and even a good example, the Eurospeak. There is a directive by the Commission at Brussels saying when you speak your national language, please avoid any cultural reference because it is difficult to translate. That's why we are still using English for this very reason. No cultural reference. Globish, let's say, the English I speak. And because there is no shared implicit, everything has to be explicit, so it entails a normative system. A normative system of behaving, gesture, body language, a normative system of speaking, So it's why, for me, the crisis of culture, the very notion of culture, a shared implicit, leads to an extension of a normative system.
And so,
Hit that mic, Thomas, hit that mic.
specifically now, we're not regenerating culture anymore. We've hit an end point, you're actually saying.
For me, internet, for me, internet is a symptom. It's not the cause of the crisis. But now we meet people with whom we share an imaginary, we share some markers. So we speak to ourselves, what I call ego altruism. We love in the other what is in us. So we have communities of similarity, and the border, the boundary with the other is, of course, rejection and even hatred. So we are experiencing in our national boundaries the same thing than on internet, except that on internet it works, but in real society it doesn't work. So hence we go to internet, and we are unable to connect real life, with the narrative of our own lives, and that's the crisis.
Maureen Kahn from the Times, London.
I think question for Professor Roy. I'm intrigued by the differences and similarities between the transatlantic far-right Christian movements. What animates them and how they share things and what they don't share. And how much is what you've described of what you're seeing in Europe is less this kind of counter-revolution, primal scream against liberalism or extreme secularism, but how much is actually motivated by, I think, Islam and race? Because it strikes me in the US that so much of this is actually a liberal conservative. It does seem to fit that schism quite well. And I was struck when you said about, maybe Catholics in Europe don't necessarily want to convert people because whiteness is still very much key to what they think of themselves. And I was struck that, J.D. Vance, who's a Catholic, has been very clear on national television that he would like his Indian Hindu wife to become a Catholic. And that for him is kind of part of the message. You don't hear so much of that in Europe. And why is it Islam? To some degree, Muslims are the most disenfranchised politically in continental Europe compared to, say, the US. And is it because those Catholics identify in Islam basically a rival anthropology, a rival system to organize political and social life? So that is the threat. It's an epistemological threat. And maybe some hope of optimism. Is there anyone in Europe that actually is arguing on the right that Muslims are not the enemy, but potentially our allies, if what we're actually fighting is extreme secularity, a liberalism that is shoring us of our norms, modernity? Is anyone making that case in Europe? Because I think in the US there are pockets of it, who are kind of finding that allegiance with Muslims. And I haven't seen it in Europe, but maybe I'm not paying that much attention.
Yeah, basically, yes, the Muslims are the others. Mm-hmm. And you construct Christian Europe against the Muslims, clearly, because Muslims are perceived from a Huntingtonian point of view. They have a religion which is anchored into a culture. The idea that, in fact, we have the same phenomena of deculturation of religion in Islam than in Christianity, they do not buy this idea. They think the Muslims, they have a culture. And we don't. So they are stronger than we are because there is a coherence between their religion and their own culture and their anthropology. Which means that, yes, they are a threat. We are weak and they are strong for cultural and religious reasons. But the other problem is the same right, Christian right, is anti-wokeism, it's anti-liberal. And many Muslims are anti-wokeism too. They are conservative in terms of family, homosexuality, sexuality, etc., etc. So most of the time, the story of identity prevails on the connection about values. But sometimes, as you said, there are some people on the extreme right, not the extreme right, but on the right, who say, well, by the way, we have more in common, with the Muslims than with the leftists. And many Muslims would buy that. Many Muslims were in France. Many Muslims would vote for Rassemblement National. Just if the party stopped to be racist, they will have a Muslim constituency.
That's not where this party is going. That's not a synthesis that is going to be... They're not going to take that lesson potentially from the way the Americans do this to say we can actually win some votes through...
Until now, it doesn't work. But this may change for another reason. We have a rise of middle class with a Muslim background now. And this middle class is ignored, but they are growing, and they are doctors, they are lawyers, they are journalists, they go to vote, and now in many cities around Paris, they have a constituency, so they can become mayor, and this rise of the Muslim middle class created a panic effect among the populists. So we have invented the conspiracy of the Muslim Brothers. According to the police, there are about 1,000 Muslim Brothers in France. But according to the right, they are beyond every endeavor to enter into public life. So these middle classes, they have no choice than to go to the left. to vote for the left, and the extreme left, because the extreme left is so secularized that they don't care about religion. You can be Muslim, Catholic, it doesn't matter. So at the national level, they vote for the extreme left. But at the local level, no, they vote for conservative. So it's a complex picture. But the problem is the lack of Muslim intellectuals. You have a lot of intellectuals with a Muslim background, but we have a lack of religious Muslim intellectuals. We have good theologians and so, but they have no contact with for sociological reasons. You know, the bulk of the Muslims come from the labor migration, so they came without their elites. And the elites came directly through the universities, and they have a problem to connect. But in next generation, the connection will be done, because the third generation of from the labor migration, they will have studied, they will have jobs, they will have entered into the political parties, and so. So I think we are an evolution. It's open. It's open.
That's great. Let's go next to Steve Kappas, who, by the way, is president of Radio Free Europe and has been an executive at a bunch of big places before this. So it's a real privilege to have you. Steve, please.
Thank you, Josh. My question is about this era that where we talk about the rise of populism and these pushes. Part of populism in many places is also giving rise to a period of not exactly religious tolerance or inclusiveness. In fact, it's becoming more isolationist and it's being exclusionary. So my question is, in this era where we're seeing that type of thing, where is there cause for hope? You talked about the Catholic Church being a universal church, but how does that operate and how does that overcome these isolationist and exclusionary? This morning, there were some very powerful messages about respectful tolerance, but it seems to me like the trends right now are pushing in the opposite direction. So where is there cause for hope?
It depends on the countries. In France, the Catholic Church has little roots, you know. At the grassroots level, it's nothing. Too few people go to the churches. There is what I call the holy ignorance, you know? So the church has no real leverage. While in Italy, it's totally different. We still have social Catholicism. Social, not in the sense of leftist, you know, but we still have Catholic networks through the civil society, through the community. Comunione Liberazione, Sant'Egidio, Focolare, etc. And if you take Comunione Liberazione, it's middle class, upper class, you know, Catholic community. They are on the right, very clearly, you know, they supported Berlusconi, etc. But their leaders follow the Pope. Mm-hmm. And when the Pope say we should be open to migrants, they do it. You know? So they speak in the churches to their people, saying, you know, so, and we have what I described, you know, people who help the migrants, although they are politically on the other side. They should be closer to the right. But because for personal reasons, because the church, the Pope said we should love our brothers, they do it now. So it depends still of the largely the weight of the Catholic Church. And of course, in many places, but not in Italy, the church has been lost legitimacy because of the sexual abuses. So it's very clear in Ireland, for instance.
Father Halík, source for hope. Want to weigh in on that?
In this, so education, experience, contact with others, yeah, to create some atmosphere of sharing the values and so on.
How about flipping to Mark Vlasic from Georgetown University? If you still got one. Still got one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you both for a very rich discussion today. I'll confess my biases. So I'm a first-generation American, and I grew up in California, so I tend to be optimistic, which is probably tough in a room full of journalists. I was thinking, as you were speaking, about the fact that the Catholic Church, about 100 years ago, I looked it up, had about between 260 and 300 million Catholics around the world. Today, there's 1.5 billion Catholics. I figure 100 years ago, the enthronement of the new head of the Catholic Church was probably very Roman and completely Catholic. I was very blessed to be invited to the enthronement of Pope Leo this year. That was a global show, right? You had the Pope on the, in the front. To, I guess, my right, his left, was the Prime Minister, President, King, Queen, leader of every major country on the planet. On the left was the leader of every major faith community, and the cardinals, like the princes of the church. I was near the front, so that was all the princely families of Europe, the US congressional delegation. Oprah sat right in front of me, and 250 million people sat behind me. It was a major global event. And as you think about the evolution of the Catholic Church and even the acceptance of Christianity, what does that tell you? That so many leaders around the world from all different faith communities showed up to Rome? And is there any other example of this happening where that installation of a leader would get that many world leaders, heads of government, and faith leaders all in the same place?
So the Catholic Church has always some attractivity. You have seen many films, Conclave, two popes, young pope. So the papacy is sexy for many people. So there is some and these events like the funeral of the Pope Francis and the election was shown. It was already the funeral of John Paul II. It was the most global events, all televisions, and so I think there is some attractivity of this tradition, and so. But yes, I hope in this synodal renewal that in this common way to transform the church from the rigid clerical system to a more flexible communication, and not only inside the church. I think it should be some radiation also outside the church. It was, I like this St. Augustine sentence. Many people, they think they are inside out, and many people, they are out, are in fact in. So don't have just the strong border. But there is the phenomenon, it was mentioned this morning also, and I would like to ask you also about this. There are many converts now in many countries. So this is very special in our country, which is people say the most atheistic country in Europe and maybe in the world. I don't think so. They were in the Czech Republic. There were very complicated religious history, the Hussite wars and the violent recatholicization and the coalition with the Habsburg monarchy, with the Catholic Church, and after the fall of the monarchy after the First World War, some Czech priests, they were the Reform movement, and they asked in Rome for some reformation, the national language, the free celibacy, the election of, and the Pope that num quam, never. And some of them created Reformed Czechoslovak Church, some of left the churches, but and then practically 3 waves of secularization One was this very rapid modernization of the Czech lands in the beginning of the 20th century. It was heavy industry and many urbanization and very high education also. But then was the second secularization. It was this communist suppression of the church. I think the communists have elected the Czech, especially the Czech Republic, as a field of the experiment of a total atheization of the society, because there was this anti-clerical tradition already. So the pressure was much more drastic than in other countries like Hungary, Poland, and so on. But it was a paradox that in that time the church have more moral authority because of this. Also, my generation of the converts, I'm also a convert for some secular humanism, and for us it was also the expression of some political protest against the communist regime and so on. And then was the third wave of secularization after the fall of communism. So many people in the church were not able to live in the pluralistic society. Some people were, some Christians were not able to live without an enemy. So when the communist enemy have gone, they must discover another enemy, the liberal West, and they practically accepted the communist vocabulary against the West, and so it's a tragedy. But it is not an atheistic country. There are always some sensibility to spirituality, and there's a distance from the church. But there's also possible. I baptized in my academic parish 3,000 young adults in these 35 years, and people are coming more and more. But there are many converts in other countries, and they are looking for this conservative way. And I think it's a great, they have some machos, they have especially young men, they wanted something in the way of the Charles Kirk, and so, but I hope it is just the period of maturation, but nobody knows how it happened.
That's good. All right, we've got 3 more questions, and then we'll take a break. We've got Fraser, Katrin, and Virginie. And then remember, 2-hour break. Enjoy, especially the cliffs, the pool. We'll resume tonight at 6 o'clock, not 6:30, right? 6 o'clock for a reception up the hill. Maybe let's start with Katrin Benholt from the New York Times.
Thank you. I just want to pressure test this discussion we're having about religion and the far right in Europe. In all of my interviews with far right militants in France, in Germany, in Britain, a little bit in Poland and in Italy, but less exposure there, religion didn't actually play a very big role. It was very much an anger against the elites. So in many ways, it's a revolt against the people in the center who have let people down. And combined with that is something, you mentioned immigration, obviously that's a big topic. I would actually call it demographic anxiety. You know, there are these falling birth rates. There's a lot of regions that actually probably are the regions that give most of their support to the far right that suffer emigration rather than immigration. So there is a sense that the culture is shrinking, for sure. And it is, you know, objectively. And if you zoom out and look at the global picture, then, you know, by 2050, 60%, I think 60% of the world population will be African, or 40%, I can't remember now, but pretty much almost half, of the world population will be African. And Europe is shrinking. The United States now has birth rates below replacement rate. So I think that is what's going on. At the same time as a political system that in the post-Cold War era has not produced a system that delivers. So this idea that the next generation is better off than yourself, that promise is gone. I mean, I think those are the root causes. The religious piece is kind of a veneer here and there, perhaps superimposed, but if we want to have a serious discussion about the far right and how to combat it, I think that's where we need to start. The energy that I'm seeing right now, because the fun is there, right? That's where the fun is. That is the revolutionary movement. When you go to rural Wales, I mean, I happen to live in Cardiff, and there was this by-election in Caerphilly recently, where I think the Conservative Party, the great electoral machine of Great Britain post-war, got 2%. I mean, they were wiped out, right? Reform didn't win in the end. It was the kind of nationalists in Wales. But reform is definitely, as you all know, on the ascent. And I think the interesting thing there is, because I have a friend who was campaigning for the Labour Party, and she was like, you would go to these places, and she would be door knocking on her own, and there would be 18 reform, like young people, really bright and bushy-tailed, excited to be knocking on doors for reform. The energy is there. And I think the conservatism and the slight kind of deer in the headlight thing is happening in the center, on the left and on the right. And the religion that I think is really in crisis is sort of the neoliberal market consensus post-Cold War. And Luke last year, who was speaking here, was talking about how the sort of 1979 was the onset of various extreme fundamentalist religions. And he sort of mentioned Iran, the rise of the mullahs. He mentioned neoliberalism as one of them. And I think the BNP in India as well came to power in the same year. So I think neoliberalism as a fundamentalist religion plays a big role here. And so rethinking a system that delivers for people and rethinking a center that delivers for people again is sort of what we're up against. So I think this is a little bit of a side conversation, maybe, in Europe at least.
Yeah, I agree with you. Religion is not an issue for the grassroots people of the populists. They don't care, My intervention was about the elites, of the how there is a kind of taking over by Catholics or so-called Catholic intellectuals to provide the populists with an ideology which is missing. They do not have a real ideology at all. It's not fascism, it's not so. But populism is more secular. And the liberalism is in crisis, not because it's under attack from the populists. It's under attack because it's in crisis. And that's something else we have to think about. Why did liberalism crawl? It's a crawling of liberalism. If we compare, it's very empirical what I am saying. But in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and early 80s, we had a real political class. We had people, like them or not, but Kohl, Mitterrand, Thatcher, and so on. So you had real people, professional politicians of high standard. Now it's finished. It's finished. The crisis of the political ruling class. It has collapsed. And it's not just because the people are less good than they used to be. It's because there is a crisis of politics. But it's another story, this crisis of politics. And we have a strong anti-establishment feeling among the populists. Immigration is a key issue because they criticize, the elite for having let so many migrants come inside. But it's true that this political elite, it's more some sort of technocratic and bureaucratic system now. The liberalism has lost its roots among the society. That's the. I have no time to elaborate on that. And it has opened a door for the populists.
How about we go to Fraser Nelson at Times? Hit that button, Fraser. Yeah.
You talk about the crisis of numbers in the French church, but there's something, I'm not quite sure how optimistic you are or what grounds you see from optimism, but you mentioned something that seemed to me to be optimistic. Well, the first is that you're talking there to in your answer to Maureen, you're saying that the first generation of Muslims didn't bring the intellectuals with them, but maybe the third generation will start to have that. So do you think that Muslim integration and community relations are going to get better as a result of that? Do you think the trend is towards better or worse relations? And when it comes to the church, we've seen something like huge numbers of conversions, 18,000 in France, 16 ordinations in Paris. I think a new evangelical church is opening in France every 10 days at the moment. So it seems to me some signs of life. Obviously not changing the big trend, but there seem to be some green shoots of recovery and optimism. But I wonder if you see it that way.
First, there is no such a thing as a Muslim community. You have a Muslim population, but not community. So the evolution, the third generation is going in different directions. Some do radicalize, of course, but the radicalization was mainly with the second generation. I made a study on the terrorists, and I found that it started in fact in 1995, and from 1995 to 2015, so 20 years, we have same patterns. About 2/3 of second generation, 20% of converts, and the rest of different things. And the statistic is stable during 20 years. And suddenly, from 2016, a totally different picture. The radicals are coming from every kind of corners of society. More and more converts, people from the different background, migrants, of course, and people without a specific classification, mavericks, outsiders, losers, psychiatric cases. The number of you had no crazy people during 20 years. The guys were very professional, intelligent, rational. They were. It's why they kill so many people, But now we have more and more psychiatric cases. People who have absolutely no Muslim background, but who say Allah Akbar when they kill somebody. That's all the difference. If they say Allah Akbar, you have a big title in the newspaper. If they say God damn you, it's finished. Nobody will speak about them. It's just a local event. So, in this sense, we cannot speak globally, but my feeling is that we have more integration for sociological reasons, the entry into the middle classes, business, politics, etc., etc. And then a more, in terms of religion, a more multipolarization. Conversions are working on both sides. Both sides. You have Muslims who do convert. And interesting enough, they used to convert mainly to evangelicalism, but now more and more to Catholicism, which is interesting also. There is an exchange, I would say, which contribute to dissolve the cultural differentiation. We have an Arab evangelical church in France, which is Zionist. That's very interesting, They go to Jerusalem, but on the side of the Jews, because they think on the Third Temple story. But they're Arabs, and they speak Arabic. So it goes in every direction.
Wonderful. How about an exit? Please go ahead, Christophe. Quick. Hit that button, though. Hit that button. Yep.
There is one Catholic parish in Paris who is engaged in conversions of Muslims, but last year, 2024, I think there were some 2 or 3 dozens, but it works. In one parish specialized in this issue, they get some Muslim demands for baptism.
Exit question from Virginie. at Le Monde. Rose.
Thank you. Thank you to the both of you. My question is addressed to Olivier. So you've spoken about Catholic and the far right in France. It's one question that often gets to me is when some French people see the situation in the US, they are very worried about evangelical, people, because they think that they are very illuminated people and dangerous people. And a lot of people in France think it's the same for evangelical in France, which I don't think is the case, in fact. So I wanted to see with you what you think about evangelical in France and its relation to the far right.
I know about that because I was part of a traditional Calvinist parish in La Rochelle. And at the end of the 50s, early 60s, we saw the first evangelicals because there was a US military base, and they had some missionaries associated with, and they had some success among the local working class youth. And so, and it's very interesting because the evangelicals, at the beginning they were Americans, but now they are local. They find they were working among the poor classes and the migrants. The migrants. The first well-organized evangelical church was for the Roms, for the Tzigans. The evangelical mission to the Tzigan evangelical mission. And the Tzigans, as you know, the Roms are not seen positively by the far right, the white right. So the evangelicals have a great success in France, but mainly among migrants or second generation. Go to YouTube and you ask Pilgrimage of Chartres 2025. And you'll see everybody is white, Boy Scouts, flags, French, royalist, Breton, and so flags, militarily organized, Latin, and so. And then you say, Marche pour Jésus, March for Jesus, same year, 2020. And then in a poor part of Paris, you have exactly the same number, 20,000 in Chartres, 20,000 in the March for Jesus. And totally different. Yeah. So I must say, the music is more beautiful at Chartres. But the people are more sympathetic in Paris, And it's métis, it's mixed, absolutely mixed. And by the way, you have a growing mixed city in terms of marriages. That's very important. I'm looking at the, the publication of the birth, the local newspaper. And I would say, when you look for Muslim names, at least 25% of the marriages, births, and through are mixed, between 25% and 30%. And then the problem of the choice of the surname, it's no more a Christian name, of course. The invention, of surnames, which are global surnames, that you cannot know the religion of the parents. So that's very, very interesting. And it shows
American surnames from the series.
Absolutely, but it's worse now. That was the good old time,
Wonderful. Father Halík, we're close, but would you like to make a closing comment? Well then, thank you, Father Halík, Professor Roy. That was great.